Well, hey, everybody. We are back with the Unshaken Faith Podcast. We're so excited. Natasha, are you pumped? I'm pumped.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, many of you this may be new to some of you who are joining us. We have, I almost said had, because we still have a podcast called Unshaken Faith. And up until now, it was weekly, little 15 to 20 minute shorter podcasts where we engaged with culture and politics from a biblical worldview. And then we took a hiatus and we meant to come back, but we never did. We're busy. We're both moms, we're wives. We have our own ministries and our own podcasts, the Natasha Crain podcast, the Alisa Childers podcast, and we just never got it together to come back. And I think one of the reasons that we were talking about is because we try to keep up with this weekly thing was just a bit too much. So we're back, but it's going to look a little different. We didn't really want to stop the podcast, but we're changing the format a little bit. And the first thing we've changed, obviously, is now we're on YouTube. So I know there's a lot of people that are listening to us right now because you're subscribed on the audio platforms. Well, I want to let you know that we are now on YouTube. So if you want to watch as opposed to listen, you can do that. And so the format will also be not weekly. So we're committing to monthly and maybe additional episodes as we are able. Now, there's a reason that we didn't really do video before. Natasha, would you like to share with our audience why we just have never taken the leap to do video?
Well, you guys would laugh if you could actually see what some of these recordings had looked like in the past when we were recording just the audio podcast, because we were in pajamas, or it might have looked like we literally just got out of bed sometimes. And we would always say, it's a good thing no one can see us right now because we look so funny.
Yeah.
And there was even a time that we've laughed about a lot of times since then where Alisa was traveling and she had to do this from a hotel room, but because of the sound dynamics, she was actually in the bed with the covers over her head trying to make this little studio out of her sheets. And we recorded this very serious episode. I don't even remember what the topic was. I don't know if you do,
I don't
Lisa.
know.
But I remember thinking, this is actually such a serious topic. And all I can see across my screen is Alisa under sheets. I mean,
I'm telling you, I'm going to post some of these pictures. No, I won't post any of you, Natasha. But Natasha, this is the thing, though. Natasha always looks beautiful. You always have your makeup done. And I'm just like, so I have a question for you. Do you wake up every day and do your hair and makeup just for the day or just when you're recording?
oh man, well, I don't think that I always look beautiful when we're doing that, but thank you for saying that. I usually do my hair, and I'm not a big up hair person, and so yeah, usually my hair is done. But yeah,
Because I have
don't
two
know.
modes. I have two modes. I have homeless, no makeup, hair in a bun, holes in my clothes, or stage ready, like podcast ready.
You
There's
do
no in
not have a
between for
homeless
me.
mode, Alisa. Well, I've never seen you in homeless mode.
I don't know. I guess maybe that means there's a third mode is clean clothes, no holes in my clothes, maybe no makeup, but hair still in a bun, but like decently in the middle, but not like makeup.
Let's call it casual, Alisa. It's still beautiful,
Yeah.
Alisa. It's just casual, Alisa.
Well,
That's
you're
what it
very
is.
kind. You're very kind. So what have you been up to during our hiatus?
Well, gosh, I was looking back at our last episode. It was actually November of last year, so it has been a long while. But the biggest thing for me is that I released a new book in February called When Culture Hates You. I think most of the people listening probably have heard me talk about that somewhere, seen me post about it on social media. But basically, like I said, it's called When Culture Hates You, and the subtitle tells the story. It's persevering for the common good as Christians in a hostile public square. So it's really just to kind of help us process, what does it mean when Jesus said to his followers that the world would hate them? What does that mean for us today? And what does he call us to do in spite of the hatred, in spite of the hostility? How do we still advocate for righteousness in society? So it's kind of those two themes together in the book. And it's kind of funny because when the book came out, it was soon after the election, and there were a lot of Christians who were feeling really comfortable about the culture at that time. Everyone was talking about the vibe shift. And I actually had lots of comments on social media saying, I don't know that the culture hates us so much anymore. I mean, isn't this kind of evidence that things are turning? I actually had a couple of people who said that they were going to unfollow me because I wasn't, up to speed with everyone else in the culture, and everyone's saying that this is such a positive mood. And I was saying, look, we should celebrate temporary political victories on certain issues that we were seeing. Some of those executive orders were really great that were coming out, like establishing that there are two biological sexes, and that's it. I mean, yes, we've got to celebrate those things. But if you think that that means that the culture is no longer going to hate Christians for where we stand just because of the temporary political circumstances, then you don't understand Jesus's words and why he would have said that at the time. So it's actually been really interesting to see in the last couple of weeks how much that has changed, that people now are suddenly saying, wow, there are a lot of people who hate Christians and what we stand for. How do we start thinking about that? So I've been talking about the book more again online just to get people to think, there is this resource out there about how do we engage politically? What do you say when people are like, oh, look at this huge Christian nationalist rally? How are we supposed to think about those things? That's really what the book is about. So that's been my focus over the last few months for sure. And
I think your book is more relevant than ever right now, especially because it's like when culture hates you, but that includes even a big swath of Christian culture. So I think a lot of people are encountering that right now. There's this everybody's having this discussion about third wayism, where and your book, Megan Basham's book, addresses why this is the case, but even platforms that people were following that they thought were really biblically faithful, and maybe in some ways were and are biblically faithful, they were silent on a lot of these topics like radical gender theory, the political advocacy to protect children from body mutilation and medications that leave their bodies with irreversible damage, fighting against abortion, and being able to advocate for those things in the public square. When people aren't talking about that, when the church is silent about stuff like that, and by the way, we're not saying like that politics is going to save us. Of course not. In fact, one of the things I love that our friend Frank Turk keeps saying is that what Charlie told him was politics is peanuts compared to Jesus. But as a Christian, we want our politics and the way we engage in the public square to be downflow of our theology and what we think about God and humanity and how we're supposed to live together in a culture. And so what we've seen is the silence of many of these big Christian platforms, or even more than silence, but kind of that lean left, punch right kind of idea, has led to a lot of pushback, even from within Christian circles. So I think your book is probably more relevant than ever. And I've also been very busy throughout the time that we've been on hiatus. I'm back on X, which I'm having an absolute ball on X, because one of the things that I think a lot of people are resonating with, there was this meme I saw after the assassination where it was like, it said, here's all the people pleasing leaving my body after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I really resonated with that. And it was like, if there was any hint of fear, pride, or cowardice in me, which the Lord really actually convicted me of, I want to be faithful, to be courage, to just not care and just say what I think as a biblical Christian about everything, and not compartmentalize my politics from my ethics, from my theology, because the Bible has something to say about all of those things. So I've been on X just having fun, still trying to maintain a kind and gracious manner about it, but just speaking truth in every area without any fear of what somebody might think or somebody else might think. So I'm having a lot of fun on that. If anybody wants to follow me, you can go to x.com, and it's Alisa_Childers. So
Alisa, we're going to check in on whether or not you still think X is quote unquote fun in a month from now on our next episode.
Well, I know I told you this. I said the progressives haven't found me yet on X. So my whole, just all the people I'm following, it's just very unified, and it's really lovely and pleasant.
It's too nice.
It's too nice. And in fact, I texted Natasha and Megan and Allie, and I was like, okay, who do I need to be interacting with to try to get some pushback? Because right now it's just all very pleasant and lovely. So I realize it's the honeymoon that will come to an end, but I am really enjoying it right now. And also my first book, Another Gospel, which was my theological memoir of having my faith tested in a progressive environment over, well, close to 15 years now. I wrote that book to address the movement of progressive Christianity. I'm so excited to announce that we are coming out with a student edition. So I worked with a girl, a great writer who is in that Gen Z kind of demographic, to go comb through the book and to condense it, to add examples that would be more relevant to Gen Z. We added discussion questions and little kind of breakout things on the side of the book that would really help equip students to do the same thing that the original book did, which was to help Christians spot progressive Christianity, give language to what they're seeing, and help them stand biblically strong in that. And I think right now is a really important time, especially for students, to be aware of progressive Christianity, because a lot of times, and what I'm seeing, and then we can talk more about this, but I'm seeing that, when I wrote Another Gospel, I didn't really see third way yet. I didn't really understand what that was. So the third way being kind of like, let's be quiet about politics. Let's not say anything too offensive as it would come to maybe LGBTQ. We're going to just come with like just the mercy part, just the grace part. Yeah, we'll explain what the biblical worldview says about these things, but we're going to really lean into kind of being soft on these things. And abortion, we're going to nuance that quite a lot. We're not going to really come out and say it because it might hurt someone's feelings. That's kind of how I would characterize third wayism, but add into that really kind of beginning to drift left-leaning in our politics. So while theologically, maybe all of the gospel boxes are checked, there's this other stuff going on that was very confusing. So I didn't really see that when I was writing my book, but it's very interesting to see even theologically how some of those third way people are drifting, even on the basic core doctrines of the faith, as they begin to add more nuance into those things. And I think it's just more important than ever to really share about these things, which is why I'm so excited, Natasha, to be doing our Unshaken Faith conference, which we've done several of these. We're going to be in San Clemente, Southern California. We're going to be in Dallas. Our theme for this year is exposing the darkness. What are you looking forward to and excited about with the Unshaken Conference?
Well, I'm so excited that we're going to be doing 2 more this year. But before I talk about that, Alisa, what's the release date for your student edition of the book?
Thank
When
you.
is it coming out?
That is a great question. I am
Do you know the answer?
I'm pretty sure it is October 25th.
Okay.
But here's the thing, too, I will ask people to do. And Natasha, you understand this. When you release a new book, it's October 21st, everybody,
Okay.
October 21st. When you are releasing a new book, you want as many pre-orders as possible, because what that does is it signals all of the different various outlets that are selling the book. If they see a lot of pre-orders, they go, oh, people want this book. This book is important. We're going to order more of this book. Maybe we'll even push it in our marketing a little more. Maybe we'll post about it on social media. There's all sorts of things that are affected by a really strong pre-release launch. So if you all could do us a favor, share about the book on social media. It's coming out October 21st. I do want to let you know that Mardel is offering a pre-order discount. They're the only outlet that I know of that's doing that. So if you want to buy it through mardel.com, do that and share about it, because that really helps just get momentum for the book.
Well, I'm so excited to see the student edition. I have not seen it yet, and that sounds amazing. That is so needed. I can't wait for that. So definitely everyone pre-order that and give it to somebody. Like maybe you don't even have youth who are in the age group that you think would benefit from the book. Well, give it to somebody else. Give it to somebody in your church. So get it out there. Well, when it comes to the Unshaken Conference, we have done 10 dates already over the last 3 years, which is kind of crazy. And we're doing 2 more this year. We don't know what's going to happen after this year yet with the conference. So don't assume you can keep going to Unshaken after this year. If you've wanted to go to an Unshaken conference, then be sure that you join us for one of these last 2 dates. If you're new to the podcast, if you don't know about the Unshaken conference, this is a conference that Alisa and I have been doing with our friend Frank Turek for the last 3 years. And it's just a one-day conference where we talk about all of the cultural issues, all of the things that Christians need to be talking about and thinking through from a biblical worldview perspective, but that churches a lot of times are afraid to talk about. And so we're hoping that we can equip and encourage you. And I'm especially excited, just as we get ready for this next one that's coming up on October 25th, that I think that there is such a hunger. I mean, we've been talking about this lately. There is a hunger with all of the tragedy that has happened lately, that people want to talk about these things that haven't wanted to talk about them before. They're starting to say, well, what do we believe about these issues? Charlie was talking about all these things. I don't know, how I feel about them. Come out and join us for this day. So again, it's October 25th in San Clemente, and then Dallas, Texas emphasis on November 8th, and you can get your tickets at unshakenconference.com. So if you used to listen, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we just really, really want you guys to come out, because especially now with Frank being with us, many people have become aware of Frank just this week. Of course, we've been working with Frank forever. He's, it's so funny. I sort of been holding this in my heart. Everybody's saying Frank was Charlie's mentor, but what people don't know about Frank is mentor is literally who he is. He mentors so many people in the apologetics community. Natasha and myself are included in that. Frank is the reason I do this. I mean, among other things, of course, in God's sovereign plan, but Frank is the first person who looked at me and said, you need to be doing this in churches. You need to be speaking out. And that was in 2016. And the whole reason I even started my blog in 2016 was because Frank inspired me to do that and told me I had been so touched by his ministry, which really helped save my faith when it was in crisis. So I just was like, when Frank told me to start a blog, I'm like, yes, sir, that's what you do, right? And so Frank is such a mentor to so many of us, and he has really become front and center in the spotlight, preaching the gospel on all these media outlets. It's just been such a joy to see that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we saw that, there are like 92,000 religion podcasts according to Apple, and Frank's podcast right now, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, is number 3.
Yes.
This is amazing. I mean, there are
Yes.
so many different kinds of religion and quote unquote spirituality podcasts included in that stuff that you actually wouldn't want people listening to. So to see that Frank's podcast that's so biblically solid and helpful talking about worldview and apologetics topics is number 3 is amazing. I'm so excited to see what God is doing. This is an example of the good that is coming from the evil and the tragedy. So we're thrilled that we can speak with Frank next month. And like Alisa said, we hope that you're going to join us. If you ever listened to the Unshaken Faith podcast in the past, you know that we would always start off with our announcements. And actually we did tips of the week, which I guess we're not really doing tips of the week.
That.
Yeah, we're not doing those. Maybe we'll have some tips next time. We'll see how we're feeling, if we're feeling like tips. But those are announcements, and then kind of giving you guys some updates, at least on what we've been doing and making sure you know about the Unshaken Conference. But obviously, when we were thinking about what are we going to come back with, what are we going to do for our first episode, before Charlie Kirk's murder, we had a couple of ideas, but of course it became obvious that we needed to honor Charlie Kirk and talk about his unshaken faith in this first episode. And so that's what we're going to do. What we wanted to do is basically come up with just 3 things each that we think really exemplify Charlie's life and how he stood for an unshaken faith that we should take from his life and go forward. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're just going to go back and forth and have a conversation about this. So Alisa, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, well, I think I, like many people, didn't really know that much about Charlie Kirk until after his martyrdom. And I posted this on X that, to my shame, I just hadn't really looked into it. I just sort of bought the vague narrative that he was just this real divisive, politics first, kind of polarizing person that was maybe just, ultra far right, all this. I didn't, and I never said anything about him publicly in a negative way. I just sort of just brushed it aside, like, I just don't really want anything to do with that, to the point where I was invited to actually do a conference that be on the platform with Charlie Kirk a couple years ago. And I declined because I thought, well, I don't want to get into that real alt-right kind of politically divisive space. And I posted on X, like, to my shame, I didn't do my homework. I didn't go like I now have after his death and watched the video after video after video of him sharing the gospel, always bringing it back to the gospel. I mean, it is very clear to me at this point that Charlie was gospel first, Jesus first. His ultimate goal was to save our kids. I mean, here I am thinking, oh, he's this one thing, when meanwhile, he's just out there trying to save our kids. So my first point was that he wasn't afraid of that. He wasn't afraid to get out there, to be called names. He was called racist, misogynist. In fact, just this week, John Pavlovitz posted on X, when you say, I am Charlie Kirk, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me. When you say Charlie Kirk, that means you're saying, I'm a racist, I'm misogynist, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a Christian, I'm a white Christian nationalist, or whatever it was. And Charlie wasn't afraid to be called those names. Charlie was not only not afraid to be called those names, but to have entire narratives created about him that even persuaded well-meaning Christians like me that he was this or that. He didn't care. He just went forward. He spoke truth. He did what he was called to do. And so I am humbled by that. that fact has brought repentance about in my own heart to say, Lord, where have I maybe pulled the punch? Or where have I maybe neglected to say something because I was in my flesh fearful that I might be labeled as a white Christian nationalist, which is so dumb, Natasha, because they've been calling me that since 2017. I know how that works. I mean, I remember when I wrote an article that was purely theological about progressive Christianity, and it went viral in progressive Twitter. This was back when I was on Twitter the first time before it was X. And meme after meme were these white Christian nationalists, Trump, MAGA, she's just this. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I've never said any of those things. So I should have known better. I've been being called that. I've had people break relationship with me because they thought I was a Christian nationalist because I would speak out on some of these issues. So I don't know why I didn't make that connection in my mind, but I didn't. And so it's really brought about change in my own heart. The example of Charlie to say, look, I'm going to go preach the gospel to these kids on these college campuses, and I'm not going to be afraid of even high-level, super powerful, influential platforms pooling their resources against me to create narratives. So I'm a new woman in that area.
That's amazing. And you're already a bold and courageous sharer
Well,
of
I
gospel
thought I
truth.
was.
So
I thought I was.
And you
But
are, but maybe
you-
this is an additional area where
Yeah.
God's convicting you, hey, be bold and courageous in these ways, in ways that you haven't been before. So
Yeah.
that's amazing to hear. And you're so right. I mean, we all saw all of the social media posts that people were going on about how Charlie is a racist and a homophobe and a transphobe and all of these things. And it became a difficult online conversation because I know that a lot of faithful Christians who knew that Charlie wasn't any of those things were trying to reason with people and say, well, no, here's context. People did debunking videos. People did articles showing, okay, here's the quote, and it was in this context. And it's hard because a lot of people who were posting those things, they didn't want to hear anything that countered their belief that he was racist and all the other kinds of things. They don't want to reason. And so I think we can do whatever it is that we can to try to bring the reason to the conversation so that people who want to hear, who want to understand can, but we also have to know that not everyone is going to want that. And as it applies to us, like you're saying, Alisa, we have to just know that people are going to misconstrue what we say. They're going to mischaracterize. They're going to misunderstand. We need to work to be as clear as we can because we don't want to facilitate those misunderstandings. But at the same time, we just have to know that that's going to happen. You mentioned John Pavlovitz. I was going to talk about that tweet too because it bothered me so much. And I actually replied to his tweet. And I said, if you truly believe that, you must be absolutely baffled at why millions of people are grieving his death and celebrating his life. I have a really easy to understand answer for you. He actually wasn't any of those things. The end. And I didn't mean it to be as snarky as it kind of sounds when I am reading that, but it's really true. I mean, you have to wonder at some point if someone's being called all of these things, maybe, just maybe, you're wrong in assuming that's the case. So yeah,
I want to read you what I responded to that tweet. I just responded with Proverbs 10:18. The one who conceals hatred has lying lips, and whoever utters slander is a fool. Because that's what it is. It is slander. It's not only slandering Charlie, it's slandering all of the people who are inspired by his life. And frankly, nobody's listening anymore. I'm sorry. Nobody's listening to those people anymore, except the small group that's still in the echo chamber, who, in my opinion, are people who are being held captive to the doctrines of demons. And I did this hashtag the other day, like, free the captives. Let's go. Let's pray for those people that are so deceived about this stuff. Let's go across enemy lines with truth and try to bring these people back, because it is just, I don't think people are listening anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are those who are actually seeking truth, and you saw people who were speaking out and saying, I believed those things too, but after I looked into it more, I realized, wait, no, he wasn't any of those things. So you had those examples of people who were true truth seekers, and that was amazing to see. But there's also some willful blindness, and sometimes when you see people continue to just post those things, I think that's what's going on. They have hardened hearts. So we just keep sharing truth, and we're obedient, and we leave the results to the Lord. Well, I guess my first thing that I would come to is that it was so convicting to me to know that Charlie realized that he was being targeted, that his life was in danger, and he just kept going anyway. He knew that, and he did it anyway. And that's a very different thing than someone who maybe gets shot and had no idea that that could be coming for what they were doing, right? Then you might say, oh, wow, that's a really sad scenario that this happened to this person. But Charlie acknowledged multiple times that he knew people wanted him dead. In fact, on a podcast last year, he said this, quote, "We get death threats all the time. They send stuff to our homes and all that. That's just par for the course. I mean, if you are not getting active death threats, you're not really doing much for the country," end quote. I mean, what a statement, right? He not only realized that people were targeting him, but he also said, this is indicative in some way that I'm doing what I should be doing. And he wasn't being overly provocative or trying to do something where he's, wanting these kinds of things, of course, but it was just the result of people hating him. It was the result of the culture hating him. And I think what is especially powerful in that he knew that his life was targeted and he did it anyway, is that a lot of that even came from people, a lot of the hatred that was behind this even came from people who claimed to be Christians in some cases, people who were accusing him of doing things that were really harmful to the gospel. And I'm not saying that they were calling for his death, but it just animated this belief that he was doing something that was really awful in society. And so it's convicting. I think it should make every one of us ask the question, if I knew that my life was being targeted for what I was doing for the gospel, would I keep doing it? And then to ask the question, well, do I need to be doing more for the gospel if no one hates me?
Yeah.
Because Jesus said that the world would hate you because you are not of the world. But Jesus chose us out of the world, and therefore the world hates us. So I think we should all ask ourselves that question. Would we still do this, whatever it is, for the gospel if we knew that our lives are being targeted?
Well, and courage is contagious. I have been so inspired by seeing so many people say, even posts about young kids. I saw a post, just Cabot Phillips from Daily Wire posted this, where he said, this is what revival looks like. And it was a group of high school kids, maybe 5 or 6 boys, thank God for the up and coming men, that went to the local mall, set up a table with free Bibles and a sign that said, ask us a question. We'll pray for you. We'll discuss things with you. And they were following the example of Charlie. And listen, that takes courage, not just on an ideological level, but knowing that the person who modeled that for you was just shot in the neck.
Right.
And then you as a high school student go do that. That is courage. That's more than just, oh, I don't want people to make fun of me because I'm a Christian. And I've seen that, Natasha, all over the place. I've been reaching out to all my contacts. I want to do college events. I want to get out there. I want to get on a mic with a college kid and try to tell them about Jesus like Charlie did. And that's no testament to my bravery or courage. I just think, I think everybody kind of gets this collective thing like, wow, he did know that. He knew that this could potentially happen. Yeah. And it actually did happen, but he still did it. And he didn't, Frank even talked about in his podcast about the behind the scenes of that day, where even Frank had told him when the drones were going out and showing all of the crowds gathering, and Frank told Charlie, I don't like this place. There's too many roofs. There's too many buildings around where people could hide. And so Charlie knew. He said, I know, but I don't want to make a barrier between me and the people. It's like he understood the risk, but he still did it. And, it's interesting when you brought up where Jesus said the world will hate you. There's another passage that it talks about, I wish I had it off the top of my head. I'm just remembering it, but where it said that he was hated because he convicted the world of its sin. This whole third wayism where everybody's like, let's just be winsome. Let's just be gentle, a gentle presence, a soft presence. Let's just try to live quiet and humble lives where we don't really say anything really offensive to our neighbors, but just let people see what Christians look like. That sort of a thing is not going to get you shot in the neck. I mean, let's just be honest. You're not going to get shot in the neck for being a quiet, soft presence where you're not actually speaking truth to the lies, being actual light in the darkness. And Jesus, it's like you think about Jesus saying the world will hate you. I don't know if we fully get that sometimes. They hated him because he convicted them of their sin. Even John the Baptist, when you think about John the Baptist being in Herod's prison, he was in prison because he called Herod out on his unlawful marriage, unbiblical marriage. Think about that. John was in prison for standing for biblical marriage, you guys. That's crazy. He was beheaded ultimately because he stood for God's law on marriage. Yeah. Just think about that. It's like this whole idea that we just need to not offend, not say the things. I think the thing I'm encouraged by, Natasha, is that people are rejecting that. Christians are saying, no, we're not doing that anymore. And I did a podcast this week where it's going to be messy. Anytime God does something really beautiful and good and true and all of that, a lot of people are going to be drawn to that. People who have bad motives, people who are false teachers. In fact, right now, the NAR prophets are all over this thing. So they're saying, "Oh, see, I prophesied Erica Kirk. See, I prophesied this." And I would just encourage our audience, don't listen to that. Don't listen to those people. That just puts you on an endless hamster wheel of trying to figure out, what is God doing? We know what God's doing. We have a Bible, right? We know the end from the beginning. We don't have modern day fortune tellers that we need to look to tell us how to live as Christians in this culture and actually derive instruction about. And that's not how this works, okay? And this is not a cessationist versus continuationist argument. There's many charismatics that agree with what I'm saying. I am not a cessationist myself, but whatever modern day prophecy is, it's not fortune telling. It's not divination. We don't need to be doing numerology with the scriptures where we, this Bible verse is this reference and then this happened at this time. That is nonsense, guys. Just drop all that stuff. Live as biblical Christians, speak truth into lies. And, this is going to be kind of messy, but ultimately, to your point, people targeted his life and he said and did what he was supposed to do anyway. And I love that. That's such a good point.
Let me just add to that before you do your next point, that it's really interesting to me how many people are raising the concerns like what you're saying right now. There's a lot of whataboutism, right? It's like, yes, but. And I think that there are a lot of legitimate concerns. Like you said, it's going to be messy in your language, right? There are going to be those concerns and those things that come up, but I don't necessarily think that that is the first response that we have to come to right now. I mean, to see all that's happening, to see the courage that is so contagious right now, to see the people who are coming to the Lord. Yes, we want to make sure that all of that continues and in a biblical way. And there are going to be concerns, but we don't need to continually put up the barrier of, but if Christians get more political, what if they start, putting politics ahead of their faith? And what if they start treating the government as their savior? I mean, it's, I talk about this in When Culture Hates You too. It's like a long string of warnings and concerns where you never actually get back to, okay, but what's the right way to do this? And let's advocate for that. And so it's over and over, I just see that people keep raising the concerns, and they're legitimate concerns a lot of times, but they never want to get back to the basics of saying, but this is how it should actually look, and advocate for that. So I would just encourage people, if you're a whatabouter, that's not necessarily a bad thing to raise those concerns. We want to be aware of them. We want to be discerning, but at the same time, let's focus on trying to equip the body of Christ with a better understanding of this necessary relationship between our faith outworking in society and advocating for the common good.
So good. And I want to give an example of that, even just from my world. So I come from this contemporary Christian music world. Like I did a tour with Chris Tomlin 20 years ago or so. And by the way, I thought he did such a beautiful job at the memorial. Really well done. Just the way he glorified the Lord, didn't glorify himself. And so, we had these other three worship leaders who have worked with NAR people, been affiliated with Bethel in the past. And so I have some angst about that, right? I have some issues with maybe where their theology has come from. I was a little bit concerned about the misapplication of the "if my people who are called by my name" passage that was said from the platform. I'm not sure if that was on the live stream or not, but that was said from the platform. And that's a misapplication. But here's the thing I'm coming at from Natasha. There's so much positive about what happened. First of all, I believe that all of those people up there are real, genuine Christians. I might have concerns about some of their theology, possibly, but I believe that they are true Christians. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't, I think, realize. In the contemporary Christian music industry, even in those affiliated with the labels that have gone out beyond just the typical CCM out of Nashville, there's an intense pressure to not get political. There is an intense pressure to remain third way-ish, big time in the music industry. Even if you're not progressive, I've seen this from some of my good friends who I know agree with so much of what's going on, but they're too scared to say something. I'm not going to name names. I could, but it was incredibly brave and courageous and risky for all of those artists that are so popular right now to go lead worship at this thing. I don't know if people truly understand how courageous that was. Because even if the people up on the platform hadn't been real vocal before the memorial, their presence there, just them saying, yes, I'll come lead worship at this thing, really, really was courageous, because they no doubt lost a whole lot of followers over that. They're being skewered online right now from the third wayers, from people are saying, oh, how dare you align with MAGA and all this stuff. They are being skewered. So there's so much positive to look at. Yes, we can have discussions. I hope to help people sort through why we don't apply if my people who are called by my name to America. America doesn't have the same covenant with God that Israel had. And yet, that doesn't mean God doesn't answer prayers. It doesn't mean that he's not faithful. But the whole point is that he was faithful to Israel in that covenant, and he is faithful today. And, so much more could be said about that. We don't want to get off on a rabbit trail with that. But just from my world, just to say, I think they were inspired by that Charlie knew that people were targeting him. And yet these Christian musicians said, you know what, we'll step up and we'll be a part of this. And I want to commend them for that, because I think that was incredibly brave. All right. So my next point is Charlie was unbelievably kind and compassionate to hurting people. This is something that stood out to me so big when I started just binging his videos like so many other people. There are all sorts of compilation videos out there from people who hated him of, maybe his worst moments, maybe moments that were taken radically out of context, moments where he was outright lied about, all kind of compiled into a reel of just 10-second clip after clip after clip, where it makes him look, like he's angry all the time, or this or that. One perfect example is when people were saying that he used a racial slur. And I'm not sure if YouTube algorithms will allow me to say it, but it's spelled CHINK, that he was talking and he was saying that word and that word over and over again. Well, then when you look at the context, he was talking to a guy named Cenk Uygur, CENK. That's who he was talking to. Interesting, Natasha. I'm always testing ChatGPT's biases. So I asked ChatGPT.
So am I. That's so funny. We should do an episode about that.
I argue. Oh my gosh. I argue with ChatGPT all the time.
That's funny.
It's very interesting. Yes, we need to do an episode on that. But I asked ChatGPT, has Charlie Kirk ever said a racial slur? And ChatGPT said it's inconclusive. And I said, okay, has he used this racial slur? And I spelled CHINK. It's inconclusive. And I said, okay, who was he talking to when he used that word? Oh, he was talking to Cenk Uygur. And I said, how is Cenk pronounced? Is it pronounced the same as the other? And I started asking all these words. And I said, so he wasn't using a racial slur, correct? Well, we don't know for sure, because some people say that Cenk Uygur's name is supposed to be pronounced with a hard J, like Cenk. Cenk versus Cenk. So it's inconclusive. Maybe he was, and I was like, I literally wanted to be like, ChatGPT, are you kidding me? Right?
Are you for real?
Are you even kidding me? But that's how biased it is toward, toward not really saying something definitive in a moment like that. But anyway, yeah, we need to do a whole episode on that. But when you actually engage with the very real conversations he had with people, you hear his tone soften when there's a hurting person on the microphone. Now, it's been said he matches energy, and he would do that. But anytime a trans person, somebody even that looked like somebody that people even started booing, he would say, no, let's show respect. I want you to say everything you want to say, and his tone would soften. And he would always tell them how much God loves them, how much Jesus wants to save them. And it was really mind-blowing to see that, because when you only see the highlight reels of perhaps his worst moments when he got a little worked up, and by the way, guys, that's going to happen. When you're doing, he's a human being. And when he's out there taking the risks to do what he's doing, student after student, day after day, hour after hour, 3 hours at a time, there are going to be times when you would too. You might lose your cool a little bit. You might get a little heated. It's going to happen. And what if somebody made a highlight reel of all of your absolute worst moments? And I got to tell you, Natasha, there weren't that many with Charlie. Maybe a couple, maybe 2 or 3 that I've seen where I'm like, yeah, he lost his cool there a little bit. That's amazing. That inspires me almost more than anything. That with how many interactions that he had, the best they could come up with was 30 seconds. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's in some of the videos where he's engaging with people, and you can hear the crowd, and they're booing the person, and he, like you said, he was always taking up for that person, giving them a right to be heard, and treating them with respect. But also such a great example of not backing down. He was still willing to share truth very directly, and of course, our culture today thinks if you share truth directly and you're just quite blunt about it, that no, there really are just two genders. It's based on, the objective truth is of biological sex. People think that that's harmful. They think that that's not kind or compassionate. But according to a biblical view, that's actually the most loving that you can be, because love rejoices in the truth, right? So even though he knew that people would think that he was being hurtful, harmful, whatever you want to call it, he was still direct with the truth, and he was kind and compassionate and loving in all the right ways. But yeah, like you said, if you are out talking on campuses as much as he was, of course there are going to be times when maybe your tone is off. But I would love to invite anyone who's being critical of him for doing that to get out and to
Yeah.
talk with people live like he does, engage with people who disagree with you as often as he was doing, and see how that pans out. It would be incredibly difficult. So much respect for him in that. I would say the next thing for me is that he wasn't afraid to apply his faith in every area of life. And, we keep coming back to this, and this is something that, kind of defines the whole moment in a way, that Charlie was known for extending his faith into the public square. So why does that mean he had an unshaken faith? Because if we have an unshaken faith, we're not going to be afraid of what the world says about us when we apply our faith in all of these different ways. Like I said earlier, there are lots of Christians, believers, genuine believers, who think that what he was doing was wrong because he was, quote unquote, mixing his faith and politics. But he was undeterred from that because he understood what the Bible said. He understands that God cares about the righteous functioning of society. He understands that the purpose of government is to promote what is truly good according to God's standards and restrain what is truly evil. He understood all of these things biblically, and then he lived his life accordingly. And of course, he is most known for extending it into the political sphere, but from everyone's account, Charlie extended his faith into every aspect of his life. And everyone seemed to have a story about how Charlie impacted them personally. It wasn't just that he was this political activist some way, but that he was checking on people in their desperate times of need, that he was making sure that people were doing okay, the people he worked with, the people he was just personal friends with. I mean, you started to hear so many of these stories. So he was not afraid to extend his faith into every area, which is what we should always be called to do, right? Because if Christianity is true, it is the true picture of reality. It lines up with everything. It's not just a belief that we happen to have that, well, this is what I think happened. This is actually a truth claim about the nature of reality, so that if the Bible is true, we know who God is, we know who we are, we know the relationship between us, we know what Jesus did, we know what we need to do in response. I mean, all that's laid out for us. So if this is the totality of reality, then we need to apply it completely and in totality to our lives. He was unafraid to do that, unshaken by the names that he was called, unshaken even by fellow believers. And Alisa, I think we've talked about this quite a few times, that sometimes that is the criticism that stings the most. You kind of expect it from the world, from non-believers, to say that what we're doing is problematic in one of many possible ways. But when you hear it from a fellow believer who's like, yeah, you're really doing something wrong, you're hurting the gospel, you're harming the witness of the church, when you hear it from other believers, a lot of times that stings more. And so I can only imagine how that affected Charlie, and he was undeterred because he was doing what he knew to be right based on his biblical truth.
Right. And, people are so concerned that he's mixing politics and religion, but we're actually supposed to engage politically from our biblical worldview. And, Chris, you and I have done a lot of content on this. We did a whole episode where we hosted Frank Turek's podcast last week and talked about that. So I want to encourage people to go back and watch that. But, it's so interesting about applying this to every area of life. This really began to be crystallized for me in a way that just got me thinking differently about a year ago, when I was at the Biblical Worldview conference that Prestonwood puts on in Dallas. It was the week before the Share the Arrows event. And Ali Stuckey and I and a couple others were on a panel. And Jeremiah Johnston, who was hosting the panel, asked each of us, what do you think is the biggest danger to the church right now? And I honestly don't even remember what I said, but Ali's answer really struck me. She said, my biggest concern is Christians who compartmentalize their faith. She said there are Christians who keep their theology compartmentalized away from their the way they engage with culture, the way they engage with politics, the way they engage with sexuality and ethics. She said there's no boxes. There's one box. As a Christian, we apply our Christian faith to all of it. And that's just that picture of the boxes really struck me. And I started to think a lot more about that. And I get why people think, oh, this is just a MAGA revival, but it's really not. I think what people need to realize is the one thing about people who maybe promote Trump and like Trump is they don't agree with everything that Trump says. In fact, the general consensus that I've been seeing, even from the memorial, is that people they find Trump entertaining. They really appreciate the policies that he is advocating for in so many ways. But most people are acknowledging he's not a Christian, right? We're not looking to him as some sort of a Christian figure. I think anybody saying he is probably misguided. And Natasha, here's a really interesting thing about the memorial. I was there in person, and about half the stadium had cleared out before Trump finished his speech. Now, that could be not, I don't think anybody was storming out because they were offended or anything, but I just think they weren't that interested. He kind of turned it into, he did his Trump thing where he goes on the rabbit trails and all that, and they just weren't interested. They were there for Charlie. They were there for the gospel. They were there for Jesus. And it was sort of like, meh. And we even kind of left early because we were like, yeah, let's just beat traffic and we don't really care about this. And I think that's kind of a testament, though, to that should speak to people that, yes, well, you can support maybe a lot of the things that the Republican Party is standing for right now. We're seeing, who would not rejoice at that many of our political leaders at least attempting to preach the gospel? I kind of giggle at Tulsi Gabbard. I like her a lot. She took a shot. She really did her best.
I know. Corinthians.
Corinthians, and then, Jesus is already in your heart. Yeah, she didn't get it right, but she tried. She probably did more than a lot of pastors are doing. And we have major political leaders of our nation professing Christ. Why would you be against that? That's a good question, I think, for people to ask themselves. Why would that be a bad thing for the people who are leading our country to profess Christ? If you think that's a bad thing, maybe you need some heart reflection, right? And so anyway,
I think that the typical person, just to answer that question, the typical person who would say, yeah, I have a problem with this, it always goes back to that whataboutism. I just keep seeing this everywhere online where people would say, yeah, but we can't impose Christianity on the country. We don't want to get to a place where we're, forcing Christianity on others. And it comes back to that difference that our friend Frank always talks about legislating religion versus legislating morality. We're not saying, and we talk about all of these things, we're not saying that we want to make Christianity the official religion of our country, that we are trying to have an established state church, right? And so there are a lot of Christians who are like, but what about, we don't want to force this on people. That's not what's happening.
Nobody's doing that. Yeah.
No, you can have those conversations about whether or not that would be a problem. And I think we would agree that that would be a concern. There's a whole other conversation that could be had about that, but that's not what's happening. So when we keep bringing this up as a concern and saying, but what about, then we're actually confusing other people. We're leading the confusion as Christians who are saying, yeah, separation of church and state. Those people were not there in their official capacities. They are also American citizens. They can go to a memorial for a private citizen. They can go to a memorial for a friend. They can speak about their own faith. Public officials are not prevented for speaking publicly about their own beliefs. And the only reason that people today think that is because they have become brainwashed by those who have said, oh, separation of church and state means that, which it never has. It doesn't even go back to our founding in a sense of, this is what you see in the Constitution. That's a whole other topic that we could go down. But I think it's just a real misunderstanding of what's going on there and a whataboutism.
Right. And, maybe we can do a whole episode on Christian nationalism because I haven't gone as deep down the rabbit hole as you have, but a lot of people just call people Christian nationalists, but true Christian nationalism, it seems to me, would require abolishing the Constitution. Now, there are some people in some theological circles that are advocating for that. I'm deeply concerned about that. But that wasn't Charlie. Charlie was a constitutionalist. He wasn't trying to, replace our Constitution with the Old Testament or something like that, or some sort of white-centric sort of thing, anti-Semitic thing that we see coming from maybe the real extreme alt-right, woke right kind of stuff. He wasn't doing that.
And he said that himself. To be clear, what you're saying is absolutely true. There are videos of him holding up a constitution when he's talking to someone saying, no, I'm not trying to get rid of this. I'm working within this, basically. And that's the point of it.
Yeah. Okay, where are we at? Am I going to my next point now? Let's see.
I think you're on point 5. Yes, your last point here.
My last point of how Charlie Kirk is inspiring an unshaken faith and should inspire an unshaken faith is that he always brought things back to the gospel. He was gospel first. He was Jesus first. You can watch so many of his interactions. There was one in particular that really struck me this week where he was talking to a girl who really, it was courageous for her to come and get up on the mic, and she was opposing. She was polite. He was polite back to her. And at the end, he said, I can tell that you have a bad impression of Christians and Christianity. And she kind of nodded her head. And he said something like, I hope we can earn back your trust because Jesus loves you. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he wants to save you. And then, she said something kind of snarky back and okay, well, you have a good day. That was Charlie. It was like he didn't want her to walk away from the microphone without hearing. And guys, don't miss this, without hearing from a strong male. He knew, I believe with all my heart, he knew that girl probably had serious daddy issues, had been failed by the men in her life, maybe abused by the men in her life. I know that Charlie understood this. The gentleness, the softness of his tone that would come over him in a situation like that. He understood the weight of what he represented to her. And he wanted more than anything, he wanted her to know that Jesus loved her, that God wants her, that God's a good father. And you can just see that exuding from him with his interaction with her. And you see that over and over and over and over again. And that was his goal. And like I mentioned earlier, he told Frank, politics is peanuts. Yes, we want to engage politically in a faithful way. And for Charlie, that was a way to get the gospel to people. I think that's something a lot of people aren't really paying enough attention to, especially in the third way kind of left-leaning Christian space, is that Charlie actually used politics just like we might use apologetics. We might use some sort of question to try to introduce a pathway toward the gospel for people. Charlie used politics for that. And Natasha, I've seen the fruit of it. I've seen the fruit of it this week. I've had two. I burst out into tears. This happened last night. A friend from high school who was I don't even know if she was ever a Christian. After high school, we went to a Christian high school. So when I say walked away, I just mean walked away from what she was taught. But she's just lived like a secular person, maybe got into some new age and some of that over the course of the past couple of decades. But she texted or messaged me on Facebook last night. She said, I'm coming home. I'm not scared. I'm not scared to say that I'm a Christian, that I want to follow Jesus. My husband and I are going to go to church for the first time this Sunday. And I'm just like, I burst out into tears when I saw that. And like it or not, that's part of the Charlie effect. Like it or not. And she even said, with all that's going on, I had another girl from high school. This is a girl you would never dream would come to faith in Christ. Same thing. She says, I didn't know. Oh, Natasha, she said, I didn't know the joy that Christ could put in a heart.
Wow.
Like they're experiencing this for the first time. This is beautiful. And like it or not, Charlie used politics as a vehicle to get to the gospel. Just watch his videos. He did it over and over and over again. And I truly believe that's why his memorial was so gospel-centered, because people wanted to honor what his ultimate priority was, and that was Jesus and the gospel.
Yeah, that's so good. I love those personal stories too. And we've seen all kinds of stories like that online too from people we don't even know, right? Who are sharing their stories, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's kind of interesting too, I think, from an apologist perspective, because you and I are both coming from an apologetics background. Like we tend to be focused on some of the intellectual stuff and answering those questions. And you kind of get into a mode sometimes as an apologist where you assume that everyone is just wanting to pursue what is objectively true. They need the answers from, the intellectual side. And we see so many people who are just saying, I've been so moved by this, and this has brought them to Jesus. And the apologist and the kind of skeptical side of me goes, yeah, but are you just falling into the feeling right now because everyone's, because there's this fervor. But then you have to remember, some of that, surely that's a what about, right? Like surely some of that is happening and people are getting caught up in the emotion of everything. But also the Holy Spirit is just working in his way. The Holy Spirit is working through so many people. people. And it's a great reminder for me as somebody who kind of focuses on that more intellectual piece of it, that this is about the Spirit, right? This is about God moving through people, and God can bring people to himself in so many different ways. Some people are searching for those more intellectual answers. Other people are coming in through just how their spirit's been moved, and then maybe are looking for those answers later. So it's just been a great reminder to me in seeing all of this and kind of telling the skeptical side of myself to go sit this one out. Um, So my final point kind of ties into what you were talking about, because you were kind of hinting at his humility in all of this, that it wasn't about him. It wasn't about his platform. It was about the gospel. That was his why. That was what kept him going, why he was out there. And I think because of that, he was ultimately willing to put himself out there and care more about the gospel message and the impact that it would have, rather than caring about his personal level of precision. And the reason I say precision is that this is kind of personal to me, and this is something that I wrote about on social media in the last week. I shared about this on both Facebook and X, that this was kind of my confession time of saying, you know what, I have idolized precision in my own ministry. I've always been much more confident as a writer, somebody who can put all the words together, take as much time as I need to make every word say exactly what I want it to say. And I have loved that. I've wanted to focus on that. And then when people started saying a few years ago, hey, why don't you do a podcast? That was terrifying to me. That was outside of my comfort zone, because I thought, but I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to make a misstep because I'm not being precise. And then I realized, wait a second, I can write out my podcasts. I can script them and no one will know, because I'm going to be behind this microphone. And so I started my podcast like that. And I have been writing out my podcast episodes ever since then. And Alisa and I have always joked, I would write out what I would say, even on our little Unshaken Faith podcast. Alisa's so great and off the cuff, and she just shows up and she's like, oh, wait, what are we talking about today? Oh, okay. And she can talk about anything. She's so eloquent. It's awesome. I love it. But I would come with the full document prepared of what I wanted to say and have all my points ready. And all of that was really because I idolized being able to make sure I never made a misstep in any way, that somebody could catch me in. I never wanted to be wrong in that sense. And so this has really convicted me, because Charlie was out there putting the kingdom impact ahead of any kind of personal safety he might have in being more precise. And you kind of hit on this earlier, where you were saying, if you do that many types of events, if you're out there, like, anyone's going to make a reel of you saying things, maybe in your worst moments, saying things that you wish you had worded a little bit differently, for example, or maybe your tone would be a little bit different. I'm so glad that Charlie Kirk was more concerned for the gospel and humble enough to put the gospel first than he was by making sure that he never said anything that someone could take the wrong way, where someone might call him racist, or all the things that we've been talking about. So that's been really convicting to me. And it was really interesting, because I shared about this on Facebook and X, and I thought this was just kind of a personal confession kind of post. I was sharing what his murder had done in terms of impacting me. And so many people resonated with this. I never expected this. It kind of went viral in a minor way on X and Facebook both, where it was ultimately seen by like 250,000 people, what I was talking about, because so many people commented. There are hundreds of comments from people who are saying, are you in my head? This is exactly how I am. This is how I feel. Like, I never want to speak truth or speak up to people because I'm afraid I won't say it exactly right. So I know it's not just me. That's why I'm taking the time to explain all this, because I know from what I posted on social media that there are tons of us out there that we would rather have the safety of precision than getting out there and just speaking truth and leaving the results to God. And to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't be precise. Our words really, truly do matter. We want to make sure that what we're saying is accurate. But instead of shooting to be precise, first and foremost, we want to share truth and not idolize that kind of precision. So that really has been convicting to me, and I'm so grateful for the life that he lived and the model that he was. And it was one of the things that has really touched me is that a lot of people have been coming out and saying, hey, Charlie, we'll take it from here. A lot of people have used that language. And I kind of love that, because it just shows, God doesn't need any one of us. We've had a huge loss with Charlie Kirk. Of course, no one's going to be exactly like him, but God can use so many different people. We just want to make sure that the why comes first, that we know that it's because of the gospel. It's because of the kingdom impact that we want to have that we're doing what we do. And I will say, in light of all of that, that this is the first time we've done an Unshaken Faith episode where I didn't script a word.
Look at you.
I am living it out. I'm living out what I said. It's a big risk because I don't want to make those missteps. And there have been things even in this episode where I'm like, oh, I wish I said that differently. But you know what? We just have to get out there and we have to do it because life is too short and we just want to make the impact.
Yeah. Well, I think so many people related with what you said, myself included, because you articulated with such precision, Natasha, I must note, such precision, what I think was going on in so many of our hearts and minds. Like even for me, Frank asked me to do college events years ago, and I was like, oh, no, I don't really do that. Debate isn't really my skill set. And I really believed that, and maybe it's true. Maybe debate isn't really my skill set. But you guys, I'm a Christian, I have a Bible, and I have the Holy Spirit. Why am I thinking that I can't talk to a college kid? Why on earth would I be thinking that? Well, it's because of what you said. I was afraid maybe I will say the wrong thing. Maybe I won't know the answers to something, and then people won't think there is an answer. Maybe I'll get stuck and make a fool of Christ or something like that. And when I read your post, I thought that's it exactly. So I don't know if you saw this, but in a comment under your Facebook post, I posted a meme of this army kind of trampling over each other and the word charge. And I said, this is the sound of 1,000 Natasha Crain fans, including me, trampling over our perfectionism, control, and need for precision to get in the battle, right? I think it's inspiring so many people to just get in the battle. And I've always told you this, Natasha, but when, so I've done Q&A panels with you, and when you're unscripted, that's my favorite Natasha. My favorite Natasha is unscripted, unfiltered Natasha. That's like, you're really good at it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, this is funny because one of the things we joke about when we were doing Unshaken Faith podcasts is we're very different personalities. And Natasha's very much like type A, everything's organized, and I'm really much more of like a type B. So we would be like making our outline and then come to the recording, and Natasha would have everything like all scripted out, and I'd be like, okay, wait, what are we talking about today? It's kind of the difference between us, which maybe it was why we work so well together, because I need type A people in my life to organize me. But that's so good, so good. And I think there's a reason that resonated with so many people, and I'm sure is resonating with those who are listening to us today. Is that it? Is that all of them? Yeah, that's it.
I think that's it.
We got through all our points. So guys, is there anything else you want to say, Natasha?
No, make sure you check into the Unshaken Faith Conference. Get out and see us at one of those locations. Don't feel like just because you're not in Southern California or Dallas, Texas area, you can't come. We had, I think at the Nashville location, especially, we had a lot of people fly in from something like 20 states or something. I don't remember the exact number, but a lot of states, people were coming in. So get out to one of our conferences. We would love to see you there.
Yeah. And also, guys, if you could do us as a favor, because this is our first video that we're putting on our YouTube channel, our brand new YouTube channel. So please share this YouTube channel out to people so that they know about it. And of course, share the podcast and all of that. But if you're watching on video, I'm going to put up a couple of those pictures of how silly I looked recording some early Unshaken Faith podcast episodes as a little bit of, come to YouTube, come watch us, because I want to bring you over here, and then share this out because people really need to know about it. We're going to be just continuing to talk about stuff that's going on in culture and in politics. And also we are going to be reviewing some very bad books. That's one of the things we're really looking forward to right in the docket right now. We're currently reading Zach Lambert's book, who's a prominent progressive Christian pastor, his book about the Bible. We're going to be reading Jen Hatmaker's new book called Awake, and we're going to be reviewing that on this channel. So let us know in the comments what bad books you'd like us to review, and maybe not just bad books, but just, I don't know, what did we talk about, Natasha, as far as book reviews? We'll definitely be doing some of those.
Yeah, I think that we want to help you guys to think through as much as we can some of the books that we know are influencing your friends. I think that we hear from a lot of people who are in that boat of like, maybe you're not feeling like you can explain what exactly is going on, but you would love to have a resource that kind of breaks it down so you can offer that to your friends. So that's what we're hoping to do, not because we just want to sit here and criticize books, but to help us think through it in a discerning biblical way and to think about it in ultimately a way that honors the Lord.
That's right. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Alisa Childers podcast and the Natasha Crain podcast for, well, I guess, our old tagline was for long form episodes, but we're doing long form here too. So we're going deep in the topics. But for now, let's remember that as Christians, we have a firm foundation to stand on that, as Psalm 62 puts it, is our rock and salvation, our fortress where we will never be shaken. We'll see you next time.